Hello once again, and Tony here, and at long last, here's my review of Vampire Hunter D Bloodlust, which was released in the United States in the year 2000 and released a year later in Japan on April 21, 2001. This anime film was directed by Yoshiaki Kawajiri. It was based on the graphic novel Vampire Hunter D Volume 3, Demon Death Chase, written by Hideyuki Kikuchi. It was co-written by Brian Irving, Ellen Moore, and Jack Fletcher. The cinematography was done by Hitoshi Yamaguchi. It was edited by Harutoshi Ogata, Satoshi Tarouchi, Kashiko Kimura, and Yukiki Ito. The production company in charge of the animation was Madhouse. The music was composed by Marco D'Ambrosio, and it stars the voices of, on the English side, Andy Philpott, Mike McShane, John Rafter Lee, Wendy Lee, Pamela Adlon, Matt McKenzie, Alex Fernandez, John DiMaggio, John Hostetter, John DeMita, Mary Elizabeth McGlynn, and Debbie Derryberry. And on the Japanese side, we have Hideyuki Tanaka, Ichiro Nagai, Goichi Yamadera, Emi Shinohara, Megumi Hayashibara, Yusaku Yara, Hochu Otsuka, Ryuzaburo Otomo, Toshihiko Seki, Chikao Otsuka, Takeshi Aono, Motomo Kyokawa, Koji Tsuditani, Rintaro Nishi, Yoko Somi, Keiji Fujiwara, Rikiya Koyama, Bibari Maeda, Uncho Ishizuka, and Mika Kanai. I was first introduced to this film 5 years ago through a very great friend and good colleague of mine from the International Academy of Film and Television, where we both did a program in acting. And he introduced me to this film, and by the time I watched it, I was completely blown away. And this was basically shown as a file that he gave to me via USB, and I was completely hooked to this film. So Santi, if you are watching this, I hope you enjoy this review, and I'm sure that you're going to have a blast with this particular review that this film so deserves. And what made this film just so exciting was just everything it had to offer. The gothic atmosphere, the superb animation, and just a lot of great elements combined to make Vampire Hunter D Bloodlust a thrill ride of a lifetime. I never grew up with the original Vampire Hunter D film from 1985, and this particular film just came up to me by chance. But this film, according to a lot of critics and fans alike, has actually been better than the original 1985 Vampire Hunter D film. And I have never read any of the mangas before, so I went into this film without any idea of Vampire Hunter D whatsoever, even though I have heard his name from time to time. And as I stated before, this was a film that left me completely breathless. Starting off with the story, we have a young woman by the name of Charlotte Elborn who was kidnapped by a vampire by the name of Meyer Link, and it's up to Dee, who is a Dunpeel, a half vampire and half human hybrid, to be on the hunt for Meyer Link to rescue Charlotte and bring her back to her family, her father John Elborn and her older brother Alan Elborn. Also on the tracks are the Marcus brothers, consisting of Borgoff, Kyle, Nault, Grove, and the youngest sister, Layla. And there are a lot of secrets that are about to be unfolded in this really epic story. And to really talk about the story is quite tough without giving any major spoilers. But suffice it to say, the entire story is very well woven. It's so full of great tension from beginning to end, and it is just an overall thrill ride. It's also helped with the gothic atmosphere, which heightens the tension and heightens the overall atmosphere, making this story very exciting, and all the more high octane, and it just left me breathless. There is just a lot of great and epic moments found in the entire story, and it is just very well woven all throughout. There are no signs of filler, no signs of head scratching moments, but it is just pure awesomeness from beginning to end, and the animation is just so god tier. Leave it up to Madhouse to really give off some of the finest pieces of work in terms of their animation. Now, whenever you think Madhouse, you think excellent animation, and this film holds no bars whatsoever in terms of the animation department. Everything is just so excellent, from the castle to the monsters to all of the character designs. You could tell that each and every animator who worked on this film contributed handsomely, and the results are just phenomenal. What you get is something that is just so invigorating to look at. It's extraordinary to witness, and you just want to jump in at the screen and just feel completely immersed at everything that you have to see, to witness. The fight choreography is so well done. The details used in this film were just so lifelike, so vivid, and they just pop whenever you least expect it. Every moment in terms of the animation is just so vivid. From the fight choreography to the bullets or the arrows to everything that this animation has to offer, the lifelike character designs, the realistic designs of the monsters, and especially Carmilla's gorgeous dress. Oh my goodness, is that dress to die for in terms of how she struts her stuff with that. It looks so elegant on her, and it just makes me feel so gobsmacked in the most positive way ever. So I'm not gonna mince words here. The animation, just like the story, is very well woven, with all of the details coming into play, and they just really pulled all the stops in terms of how lifelike and how vivid everything was pulled together. Everything was just so well done, so thrilling, so invigorating, that it's just a great marriage of style and substance. And that, my friends, is just how this film exceeds with flying colors. It goes out of its way to marry style and substance into one harmonious thrill ride, and that is just the major strong point of what makes Vampire Hunter D very watchable, and all the more a masterpiece in its own right. And the music is very well done. Special kudos has to go to the composer, Marco D'Ambrosio, who has a very superb score. The biggest highlight in terms of the music really has to be that gothic chant when Dee is about to enter the castle and we are treated to chants of Salve Regina, to show that Carmilla is the dominant force of this entire film. She is the one who takes charge. And it's also helped that the chorus is just so excellent in terms of the build-up. And I haven't talked about the build-up yet. The build-up is just so excellent, especially when it comes to the story, and especially reflected in terms of the music. The build-up in terms of everything the story and the music has to offer just flow magnificently, and they hold no bars whatsoever. And now we go to the characters, starting off with our main hero, Dee. Dee is an absolute badass. He is cool, calm, and collected, but at the same time, he is very lethal. On initial impressions, you might think that just because he is stoic, you might think he doesn't have a soul whatsoever. But he does, in terms of his drive and determination, and in terms of trying to keep himself alive whatever means possible, mostly due to the fact that he is a Dunpeel, a half-human, half-vampire hybrid who nonetheless fights to survive, but is also bounded by certain limitations that also make him all the more human. Yes, they're also quite subtle, but they're nonetheless there. It's basically shown in his confrontation with Carmilla that he does have his doubts, but despite those said doubts, he manages to beat those doubts with such flair and style, and he does it well in such a masterful way. And Dee just basically comes alive as a character in terms of his stealth, his focus, determination, and his very fantastic one-liners, which are also a fine sense of just how fun this character is. And he is not only a great swordsman, but his other weapon also involves his right hand. And speaking of his right hand is also a great sense of entertainment as well. He is a great complement to Dee's stoic nature. The right hand is essentially a more lighthearted yet sarcastic character who can crack jokes and really lighten certain situations, especially considering that this film does tend to be rather heavy in terms of its overall dark themes. He really knows how to lighten the mood when it's called for, and he's also very fun as a character. Meyer Link is a very fascinating character as well. Initially, you might think that this character is an outright evil character, given the fact that he's also one of the antagonists. But once you get yourself invested into Meyer Link as a character, you'll find out that he is not an evil person. He's a tormented soul. He is a very lonely man who just wants love and wants a lot of companionship, but nonetheless has this stoic aura about him and is also quite the badass himself, being also a very skilled swordsman. And his skills as a swordsman also match Dee's very, very well, to the point where the chemistry that they have as enemies is so palpable, but is nonetheless so mesmerizing to witness. And it is just so thrilling to see an anti-villain like Meyer Link just grace the screen in terms of his dark and brooding nature, and he really knows how to have that presence on screen. It just screams he may be a very statuesque and powerful figure, but he's nonetheless a very lonely soul who needs someone to love him, and he just needs someone who could be able to accompany him throughout all of his life's trials. He is someone who does have his own sense of loneliness, and you can't help but feel bad for him, but he is nonetheless a very charming character and a very awesome anti-villain. Charlotte Elborn is another great character in her own rights. Now, you might think that she might come off as the typical damsel in distress. It's proven wrong when she states that she wants to be free. She wants to love Meyer Link, and she just wants to love Meyer Link as who he is without anybody giving a crap about what her life is going to be at stake. Yes, Charlotte's loyalty to Meyer Link does come off as questionable, but the chemistry that these two have is just so palpable that they're not just a pair of lovers, but characters with their own flaws and their own needs of what they want in their lives, and they just want to escape it all. And now we go to the Marcus brothers. Borgoff is the de facto leader and is basically the large and in charge guy who calls the shots and is basically the one who keeps the group together, and he has this presence that makes you just feel so in awe of just how large and in charge he truly is. And he has not only the built of a large and in charge guy, but also that subtle command in which demands respect and demands attention. Kyle is basically the lethal and very precise gentleman who is also quite the straight man, but also is more on the cocky side when it comes to his attitude. But don't let his overall cocky nature fool you. His bite is worse than his bark, as he knows how to use those knives with the best of his abilities, and he really knows how to use his weapons with deadly precision. Nolt is basically the muscle of the group, as he wields a giant sledgehammer with a blade attached to it, and he knows how to use that with such finesse and power, but he's nonetheless the muscle of the group. Grove is also quite interesting, in which while he does appear rather sickly, he has this certain power that once he is injected with this special serum, his spirit comes alive and he is ready to attack. And he's quite interesting as a character. But Layla is by far the most interesting out of the Marcus brothers. Layla is very interesting because while she is initially a rough, tough, and basically independent-minded young woman, she's also someone who also has her own fears and doubts and skepticisms of what she has to feel about the world around her. She's someone who is the most human out of the Marcus brothers, and she's someone who I've been rooting for from beginning to end, mostly because she is quite relatable as a character, and she has certain quirks about her that make her really all the more human. You could definitely tell that Layla is someone who is very much worthy of all of my sympathy, empathy, and just makes me want to root for her from beginning to end. She is a very well-written character, and even a very well-written anti-heroine at that. She's not 100% good nor 100% evil. She's just in that fine line where she feels that she has to survive, which is why she became a hunter in the first place, because she has to survive on her own and has to prove to herself that she's not just some little girl who constantly wants someone to save her. She's her own person, and she's gonna do the saving herself. And that's what makes her really all the more great as a character and all the more a standout when compared to the Marcus brothers. She is one of the most human characters I've ever seen, and she really bursts with a lot of relatability and empathy that makes me want to root for this character from beginning to end. And then we go to the Barbarois, who are just so awesome in terms of how they work as a group, but also how they work individually. Benga is basically a shadow manipulator, and he has a laugh that can give the Joker a run for his money. And he also has this creepy presence which makes you want to say, don't even mess with him. Mashira is basically a werewolf, but not just any werewolf. Once he transforms into his werewolf form, his stomach, it turns into a mouth complete with fangs, making him all the more intimidating and all the more awesome as one of the antagonists of this film. He is quite awesome in terms of his abilities, and he's also one of the more human Barbarois characters when it comes to his overall demeanor and his overall motivations. You could tell that he's also one of the more fleshed out. Caroline is basically quite a creepy character in her own special way, mostly because of the fact that she's able to use metamorphosis in a way that makes her all the more badass. She is a force of nature to be reckoned with, and I mean that both in a literal and figurative sense. She manages to really control nature and manipulates each of the trees that she gets herself into very well, and she manages to be quite frightening as an antagonist. From her single-minded determination to her abilities, You could definitely tell that this is a character you do not want to mess with. And then we go to Carmilla, the queen mother villainess of this film. She has a presence which is very charismatic, but also very commanding. You do not want to mess with this blood countess anyway till Sunday. She will screw you up psychologically, physically, and emotionally. That is just how powerful Countess Carmilla really is. And as I stated before, her design is just so flawless. It drips with godlike intensity, and her presence just adds to the overall epicness of this entire film. She is a force of nature to be reckoned with, and she is just plain awesome as a villainess. She is without a doubt one of my most favorite villainesses of all time because of her strong presence and also that cold-hearted demeanor, which makes her even more terrifying as a villainess. And the minor characters also do fantastic jobs in contributing to the film's plot, like John Elborn and Alan Elborn. Now, you might think that they're just a father and a son just wanting Charlotte back, but there's also quite something to them that makes them all the more human and makes them stand out in their own special ways. Hulk, who may be an old engineer, is just so fun as a character, mostly because of just how cool, calm, and collected he is, and he just has a freaking big gun to back him up, making him a very fine, badass grandpa. The sheriff is basically a very straight-minded character who may not always understand certain things, but is nonetheless an upholder of the law. And even the Barbarois elder also comes off as the ringleader of the Barbarois clan, and he really knows how to make his presence known by being the voice of reason, but also the voice of pure intimidation. So I am not going to mince any words here whatsoever. The characters are just excellent. The main characters do have a lot of great dimensions and great amounts of development, and even though the smaller characters might not have as much development as the main characters, they still manage to chip in terms of how awesome they truly are as people, and they have really great lines to play off of, and their personalities are just unique and full of pure distinction, which makes all these characters all the more likable and just a lot of fun to watch. The voice acting is so top tier in both languages. Andy Philpott and Hideyuki Tanaka really know how to make Dee a very enigmatic and mysterious character, thus adding a lot of layers to him, making him all the more fascinating, but all the more deadly as a character. Mike McShane and Ichiro Nagai both give the right hand a lot of great personality and a lot of humorous lines, but also backed up with a wise, mentor-like personality, making this character come alive. John Rafter Lee and Koichi Yamadera both give Meyer Link his distinctive charm and also a brooding nature, which makes him not just powerful, but also quite human as a character. And they both have very fine and sensual baritone voices, which makes Meyer Link come alive as a character. Emi Shinohara and Wendy Lee really know how to make Charlotte a very sweet yet independent-minded character. I'm especially surprised with Emi Shinohara as Charlotte, as I've mostly known her in a lot of tough girl roles like Makoto Kino from Sailor Moon and a lot of teen mom roles. So to hear her portraying this sweet young woman was quite alien to me, but she managed to pull it off wonderfully as she was able to give Charlotte a sweet-sounding, gorgeous voice, and Wendy Lee is no stranger when it comes to voicing young female characters. I mean, you shouldn't look any further than her portrayals of Chai Shanghua and Haruhi Suzumiya. She did absolutely fabulously as Charlotte, making her not only a sweet character, but also quite independent as well. Pamela Adlon and Megumi Hayashibara both do very fabulous jobs really making Layla a tough, independent, and fierce character in their own special ways. Pamela Adlon's delivery is a lot more guttural, and Megumi Hayashibara's is a lot on the smoother side, but both of them are very seasoned voice actresses as they do very fine jobs making Layla come alive as a character and making her all the more relatable. John DiMaggio managed to voice a lot of the other supporting characters of this entire movie, and he manages to give a certain distinction to each of the characters. With Nault, he manages to make him a very imposing character. With John Elborn, he manages to make him a very dignified character, and even to a lot of the smaller characters like the sheriff and the priest, he manages to add a little bit of human-like layers to them and manages to really underplay his performances quite well, making them all the more subdued, and he is just a pure master when it comes to acting. I mean, this is the same guy who also voiced Jake the Dog, Dr. Draken, and the Scotsman from Samurai Jack. And when I listened to him portraying these roles, I was completely gobsmacked. Now, the fact that you have a great voice actor like John DiMaggio voicing all these characters is just quite an accomplishment. And then we go to Matt Mackenzie and Yusaku Yara, who managed to give Borgoff his tough personality. Matt Mackenzie is on the more laid-back side, but Yusaku Yara is on the more emotionally charged side. But these two are very seasoned actors as they managed to give Borgoff his tough, big guy personality, and they managed to make Borgoff a very large and in charge character who takes control of the situations and calls the shots. Alex Fernandez and Hochu Otsuka bring a lot of charm, charisma, and likability to Kyle. Bibari Maeda and Julia Fletcher were absolutely fabulous as the Blood Countess Carmilla. They both had superb mezzo-contralto voices which are very imposing and managed to make the Blood Countess Carmilla come alive with such flair and such vivacity. Ryuzaburo Otomo as Nault, who is no stranger to voicing a lot of the big guys, as he manages to give Nault his booming basso voice. Then we go to Jack Fletcher and Toshihiko Seki as Grove. And these two voice actors really did wonderfully in voicing Grove, making him a very fragile character, but a very sympathetic character in which you really just want to jump at the screen and just give Grove a big hug. Then we go to Dwight Schultz, who not only voiced the Barbarois Elder, but also Benge. And his performance as Benge is enough to give Mark Hamill's The Joker's laugh a run for his money. The way he managed to use his high-pitched, stringent voice with this particular character is not only frightening, but mesmerizing, as he managed to really bring in a certain amount of nobility to the Elder and a certain amount of creepiness to Benge. The same thing I could say about Keiji Fujiwara. I've known this gentleman as Maze Hughes from both Full Metal Alchemist 2003 and Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood. The fact that he was also able to give Benge his high-pitched, stringent voice and that maniacal laughter, but at the same time toning down his voice a little bit for a creepier vibe is just enough to show just how truly talented Fujiwara-san really is as a voice actor. John Hostetter and Takeshi Aono managed to give Polk his badass grandpa nature, but they also managed to make him a very wise character, which is very fun and exciting in my book. And then we go to Chikao Otsuka, who also managed to give a certain amount of dignity to the Elder, and even John DeMita and Koji Tsujitani managed to do very well in terms of their performance as the small role of Alan Elborn. Mary Elizabeth McGlynn and Yoko Somi managed to give Caroline her threatening, frightening, deep contralto voice, and they just did fabulously, really making Caroline a very thrilling character, and at the same time making her a very badass character at that. The same thing I could say about Riki Yokoyama as the sheriff. Even though he doesn't really have a lot to say in this film, he really knows how to use his bass baritone voice to the best of his abilities, making the sheriff quite the imposing figure. And we even get some fine performances from Debbie Derryberry on the English side, and on the Japanese side, Unsho Ishizuka and Mika Kanai. So overall, the voice acting is just superb, and all the voice actors really know how to bring all of their characters to life. And I really have to say that the major treat, especially on the Japanese side, is to hear three of my most favorite voice actors of all time, Koichi Yamadera, Toshihiko Seki, and Megumi Hayashibara, contribute handsomely to this film, all thanks to their very strong performances. And when it comes to the English side, we have the treat of having veteran voice actors like John DiMaggio, Mary Elizabeth McGlynn, and Debbie Derryberry, and even Wendy Lee give off such fine performances. So overall, it is a uniform effort on both sides. So what more can I say about Vampire Hunter D Bloodlust? It's got a well-woven story, mesmerizing animation, great music, interesting characters, and masterful voice acting. And you all know what I'm going to give this film. A well-deserved 5 out of 5 stars. Please go ahead and watch this film. Heck, you might as well experience it for yourself, because this is a once-in-a-lifetime offer. This is not just any anime film. It is just a major trip that you will basically feel so exhilarated from beginning to end at just how epic it is. There is just no doubt that Vampire Hunter D Bloodlust deserves a lot of my respect. Well, that's all for now. Be sure to tune in tomorrow for my review of Dmitri Shostakovich's The Nose, live from the Royal Opera House. So until then, good night, everybody.